Hey Dataflow fans, let's today talk about how you can send in dynamic expressions into your mapping data flows so you can change data transformation at runtime. Alright, let's dig in. So inside of mapping data flows, either in Azure Data Factory or in Azure Synapse Analytics, there is a function, and this function is going to be the primary capability that's going to enable us to set the transformation in the expressions dynamically at runtime. The function is called expr, or expression. Let me show you the documentation for that. All right, and I will place a link to this, to the expression in the documentation in the description of the video. And what you can do is you can set a string inside of that expression as an argument, and mapping data flows will execute that string as your expression at runtime. So that enables a lot of very interesting use cases, and the one I'm going to demonstrate for you today would be, back in my Data Factory data flow, would be to set a filter so that you can have some data quality rules that are dynamic. And I'm going to set data quality rules in a text file in my storage account inside of Azure. This is a very simple example, right? And the data flow you see on my screen is really just filtering from a source and then landing the filter data into a sink. But you can expand upon this for a myriad of different use cases once you understand how to set that expression dynamically at runtime. So let me first show you what I'm doing. I have inside of the filter, instead of hard coding the function in the expression here, I'm simply saying toBoolean expression and then the name of a parameter. So my parameter is called DQRule1, and the reason why I'm saying toBoolean is because the expression is going to actually evaluate that string that I send in as an expression at runtime. And filter is a Boolean true/false of whether or not each row passes that filter, and will the filter pass that row on beyond that step in your data flow. In this case, because the expression is simply being evaluated, I need to turn the return value of that expression into a Boolean, so I'm explicitly casting to Boolean. So that's all fine and dandy. Now how do I send that parameter for my DQ rule in at runtime? Well, back in the pipeline that executes this data flow, which I call a dyna expression, I have set a parameter. So let me go back to the data flow, and you'll see that I have a parameter here called DQRule1. My default value, so that I can easily test with debug and data preview, is color is red. So let me actually show you why that's easy to test. When I look at my sink, I can refresh this, and I'll be able to test the logic that I've put in my data flow for some design time unit testing, and then I can go back in and set that parameter from the pipeline. It's a really good practice in terms of testing within your design environments in ADF. And you see that only the color red, the rows with the red, have come through. This is from the AdventureWorks product database table, and so there's a bunch of different colors in there, so we'll test with different colors. That was filtering in red as part of my default value for my parameter, and the expression is being evaluated at runtime. And again, so you can see the different colors that are in the data sets. If I go back and I look at that again, the color is equal to red. So that would be the same as simply typing that in statically in the expression builder. Just paste that in there like that. Of course, it wouldn't be double quotes around it because it's not a string. It's an expression. If I just evaluate that parameter at runtime, I'll get the same effect and make it dynamic. All right, let's go back to the pipeline. Now, because I have that data flow parameter, that'll show up in the activity under parameters. And there it is, DQRule1. Before I show you how to set that value dynamically from dynamic output of the previous activity, let me just take that out and I'll reset the activity so that I can show you that the default is actually brought forward into the pipeline from the default value on that data flow. I'll just switch it up and I'll go back to dyna expression. And so the color equals red is hard-coded in there. So this is obviously one way that you can parameterize that expression inside of your data flow. Now, an even more dynamic way would be to do what I'm doing here, which is looking up the value from a file or a database table, or some other source that has your rules in it. So this is an example of a data quality rule that is external to ADF, that is driving the filtering and the expression for your data flow in your pipeline. So what I'm doing is I'm looking up this file in my dataset called DQRules. Is a file called dqrules1.csv. And then from the output of that, that is where here inside of the parameter I'm going to set that dynamically. So let's take out the color equals red, the hard-coded value, which is the default from the data flow. And let's make it dynamic as a pipeline expression. So what I can do is I can take the output from that lookup activity prior to this data flow activity. I'm going to take the value, and I'm saying the array element number 2, and I want the field called pass rule. So let me show you what the file looks like, and I'll explain to you why I'm setting it this way. So inside of the file that I'm reading, that dqrules1.csv, I have 3 different rules. And this is my header. I have the file set up as rule name, source, type, and pass rule. All I want to use in this case is just the pass rule, what should pass through the filter. So my expression is color equals red, the same thing I had in the default static string. Notice that because I'm passing this from a text file, I need to just make sure that I am escaping the single quote marks within that string. And then I called my rule color rule. So I want the third element in there, and it's zero-based arrays within the pipeline of Data Factory, and so it is element 2. Now what happens, it's actually, well, we'll keep it as red for now for this first test. Now if I execute this, let's go ahead and run it from debug. It's going to first, Data Factory will first run this pipeline here in sandbox debug mode, so I don't need to publish. It'll look up all of the rules that I have in there and take the second one, and it'll pass it, the rule as an expression, as a parameter dynamically into the expression for my data flow. So let's go ahead and refresh this. It is running now, and let me actually, while I'm doing this, show you what the sync looks like. So the sync is going to land the data into this file called param.csv in my storage container. So back on the pipeline, let's take a look at the status. We have about 30 more seconds to go, so let me just quick pause and come back once the baking is complete. Alright, the execution completed. We can look at the results now inside of the param.csv output file. And let's refresh. And now we only see red products inside of there. Now, to show you how to make it, how it looks like when you make this dynamic and you change your expression externally from ADF, you can go into that file, and I can change red to, let's say, let's only look at the black products. Products with the color black. Now when I go to my pipeline, I'm going to execute this again, just hit debug. No other changes are needed because this is not a design time change, so no compilation is required. This is simply runtime configuration change. Execute it. It's going to read the rule, send it into data flow. Let's pause for 30 seconds and come back. Okay, the execution is complete. Now we can go to the output file. We'll refresh, and they're the products that are of color black. And that's how easy it is to make your mapping data flows dynamic using the expr function. All right, thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.